Hey guys, welcome back to my Practically Imperfect Life. I recently had the opportunity to get my hands on the entire middle school science collection from BJU. I have had an opportunity to look at the teacher manuals, the lab books, the test kits, and the textbooks themselves, starting with the books that is for fifth grade, all the way up through, I think, what they actually put in their program for ninth grade. And if you know me, if you've been watching for a while, you know that I'm a complete science nut. I love all things science. In fact, all of my college degrees were in science fields. So I've studied biology, chemistry, nursing. I love science. I love teaching science, but I am very picky about what science programs I've chosen to use with my own kids throughout the years. We have used BJU. We used it once. We used BJU's sixth grade science, which I actually think this is the exact same book that my son used when he was in sixth grade. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And then we had actually switched over to using Apologia for seventh and eighth grade, and then a mixture of Apologia and Barium Builders throughout high school. But we've also thrown in some elective science courses from Guest Hollow as well. So I have taken some time to look through these books, how they're organized, what topics they cover, made some notes on what I think are some of the good features of these books, what are things I think might be either not necessarily lacking, but things that might not work for every student. And I thought I would just give you my thoughts. And if I were to use this, how would I have used it grade wise? Like, how would I have organized it and what would I have done with my kids? So I'm just going to start at the lowest grade and I'm going to work my way up for there. So this is the Science 5 textbook. And I will say, I think this is actually a really nice program for fifth graders. It is what I would call bite-sized bits of science. It covers a little bit or introductory information on a couple of different science topics that are then expanded upon in some of the later curriculum. And I think that's, something that can be really good for a student who's in fifth grade. I think a lot of people enjoy doing like unit studies where they're doing more in-depth stuff in different science categories with their younger students, but something like this I think would be easy for a student to follow. It's going to give them some introductory information. So that way when they're meeting that information later on in middle school or high school, it's not brand new to them. But it is bite-sized bits, so it's nothing too extensive. The pages are actually quite lovely. They have quite a lot of pictures and graphics and diagrams. The text is nice and large, so it would be easy for a student to read. So I think a fifth grader would definitely find this to be quite engaging. And then there's at the end of each lesson, let me see if I can find the end of a lesson page here to show you an example. Here we go. Okay, so there are just a few little review questions kind of at the end of different sections. They just give a couple of things for students to do based off the stuff that they're reading. So it's a decent science program, I think. I think this one would work out quite nicely. And I want to say that they had recently redone this one. Let me look at the publication date. Oh yeah, this is 2025. So this is brand new. And I think they have probably made some improvements to their previous version of the grade 5 science. So I thought this was, pretty good. Again, if you have a student who would prefer to like deep dive into topics when they're, in lower elementary, you could certainly look at something that's more of unit study based where, you're spending more weeks on a given topic. But this is definitely something where every couple of weeks they're jumping to a new area of science and exploring a new area of science, which might keep some of your kids more engaged, particularly if like you get onto a science unit and they don't like love it. They're not stuck with it for a really long time. Now, the Science 6, like I said, my son used this exact same book when he was in sixth grade, and he is an 11th grader now. So this book has not changed. It is pretty much the exact same thing. In fact, when I got my hands on this, I was like, I'm sure I have that textbook somewhere laying around. Now, as you can tell, it is much smaller print-wise and even thickness-wise. Like, look at that. Look at how tiny that grade 6 textbook is compared to the grade 5. If the grade 5 science was little microbits of information, this is super microbits. Like I felt like a lot of different science topics are introduced and nothing is expanded upon in any great detail. I mean, it's very, very basic information and then quickly moving on to the next little bit of information. Now, when my son took this course, it was the one and only time I had him do a distance learning course from BJU. So that is when you log on and they watched the video lessons that went along with it. Now, I say it was the one and only time we did that because I quickly found that their video courses, while they're not bad, there are a number of them that seem a little dated. They're very expensive, and sometimes they're just long, like really long. I'm like looking at the textbook, I'm like, why does it take you that long to lecture on a page of information in the textbook? And so it just seemed kind of odd to me. It's like if you really wanted to expand upon the subject, then make a beefier textbook. So who knows, maybe this one is slated to be redone in the next couple of years. So while it still has pictures and graphics, I don't think it's nearly as as I don't know, visually engaging as the 6th grade book or as a 5th grade book. It's just kind of there, and it's okay. But honestly, it would not be my first choice to do in 6th grade. And in retrospect, like I said, we used this when my son was in 6th grade. I probably would make a different choice at that level. Now, they have a series of 3 topical textbooks that come next. So they have one that is on life science, okay, one that is on earth science, and then one that is on physical science. Now, from what I gather from their site, the idea is to start with one and then each year you do a different topical study. So basically, if you did science 6, you would do one of these in 7th grade, one in 8th grade, one in 9th grade. Now, here is my thought. I think if you had a student who was maybe like a struggling reader or really just had a hard time focusing long term on particular subjects, maybe the Science 6 book might be better suited for that student. The reading level is definitely far below the next textbook reading level, far below. So you could go that route. But if you have a student who really does enjoy science and they're a fairly decent reader, I would actually suggest that you skip Science 6 and you start life science in the 6th grade. And why do I say that? First of all, out of the 3 topical subjects, so life science, earth science, and physical science, I think this is the one that's the easiest to understand. You're talking about cells, cell structures, you're talking about biomes and ecosystems. There are a lot of sections in here that are basically like an anatomy course, like a little mini introduction to the human body. And all of those things are things that I think a 6th grader can easily grasp. They're just topics that, they like what 6th grader doesn't like animals, right? And the textbook itself, I mean, it's soft cover, so, so your kids take care of their textbooks, but it is quite lovely. It's got, again, lots of graphics, lots of pictures. I mean, that's actually a really beautiful rendering of cell division there. I think that's a really great graphic. And so this could be something that I think could be really helpful for a student. Now, I think this is perfectly fine for a 6th grader to use. I did not see anything flipping through this that I thought was too hard for that grade level, or kind of beyond anything that would be like age appropriate for that grade level. I think this would be absolutely fine. Now, there is the option to get a life science, well, they call it like the activities book, but in really it's a lab book. So this is the teacher edition. I don't have the student version with me, but this is the teacher edition of the activities book. And so these are basically labs. That's really what a lot of it is. There are labs and then there's reviews in there. So you have all of the instructions for the lab that would be in the student book, all of the materials that you would need, questions that they should answer along the way. The labs are, again, totally age appropriate. These are all things that a 6th grader can do with some parental guidance. I don't think I necessarily would like just hand it to my 6th grader and be like, go, be free. I would definitely guide them through that. But I think they're all ones that are relevant to the material that's being taught. So I thought that was pretty darn decent. I have always enjoyed teaching life sciences. This is what's going to build into biology later on. So a lot of this stuff these are the topics that are going to get expanded upon in their high school biology course. And if they take a human anatomy course, obviously everything about the body systems will be expanded upon in much greater detail. But I think this is really good. I also really think it's not a bad idea to study the human body when you're at kind of that 6th grade age, because this is before they hit puberty and before there's an awful lot of body changes. And so kind of having an understanding of how your body works, not a bad idea. So that is what I would suggest, would be to skip the Science 6 and do this in 6th grade. The next one that I would recommend would be to start to move into the earth science. So again, I think they put this more as 8th grade, and I think this could be totally fine for 7th grade. Now, earth science, when you think about something to study for a whole year, earth science is one where I think students are really going to enjoy it and grasp it, or they're not gonna love it. There's rocks and minerals and soil and earthquakes and volcanoes and things like that. And these can actually be really fascinating topics to study. But you're probably going to have to do some extra things to try to make it engaging. Just flipping through a textbook is not going to be engaging enough. I would definitely check out videos that are available on YouTube. I would make sure that you're definitely doing experiments. Maybe go and order like a rock and mineral kit, so they have some things to look at. Make models of things, make a shaker table and build a model house and see if it'll survive an earthquake, things like that. Do some things to kind of make this subject material engaging, because you go from life science and studying animals and all of those things to like, hey guys, we're going to study rocks and dirt. And it's kind of hard to get students really excited about that. But there are lots of really interesting topics within this. Again, just like all of the other ones, lots of pictures, lots of diagrams. It really is a lovely book, and I hope this is coming into focus. Let's see if it is. Maybe get into focus a little bit there. But it is a nice textbook. It's pretty decent. As far as the material it covers, it introduces, it introduces one chapter where I actually feel like that would be more appropriate for physical science, but that's me. It talks about forces, matter, and energy. And matter, yes, matter, you can definitely discuss a little bit in earth science, but I feel like that probably fits more with physical science when we're starting to get into chemistry, and physical science tends to have physics principles, but they put it here. Geology with the changing earth, earthquakes, volcanoes, minerals, rocks, fossils, oceans and the seas. There's a huge section in here on oceans, which that could be a lot of fun to study. The atmosphere, weathers and storms, and then the solar system is included in this too. Now that is a subject area that I think that one naturally kids will enjoy. It's getting past the, erosion and weathering and things like that can, you have to work to make that a little more engaging for your student. So this is the next book, and it is quite a fat textbook. Comparing the two. So this one here is the life science, and then that one's the earth science. So you can see it's just a little bit of a beefier book there. And then the last one is physical science. So they have this more for like 9th grade, but kind of like 8th or 9th grade. I don't think there's anything wrong with waiting to do this until 9th grade, but I feel like it's more appropriate for 8th grade. And this is looking at like planning out sciences overall in high school, because we're homeschooling, so you can choose what sciences you want to do. However, in general, we see most students taking a high school biology course, a high school chemistry course, and then a high school physics course. Those are kind of like the big 3 sciences. And especially if you're going into certain degree fields, you need to have those sciences. You need to have had some exposure to them before you hit college. Now there's lots of other science things you can study in high school. You can study botany, and you can study anatomy, you can do marine biology, ecology. There's lots of things you can do. However, those are the big 3. Physical science gives a introduction to chemistry and to physics. It just seems a little weird to me to do this in your freshman year and then do, maybe you do biology your sophomore year, and then you're right back to this, and in your junior year, and then maybe physics your senior year, and then where do you fit in any elective sciences? Whereas if you do this in 8th grade, you can do like biology, chemistry, physics, and then your senior year, pick an elective that you like, or squeeze in an elective in a different year. That's just me. I would much rather get these 3 topical studies in middle school and then move in to kind of like, again, the big 3 sciences, and then maybe a elective that they would enjoy during their high school years. Anyways, physical science covers a lot of material that definitely I think your student will do much better with if they're at least in 8th grade. Understanding chemistry and chemistry principles can be confusing. It can be something where they either grasp it really easily or they don't. And so kind of waiting until they're kind of at that tail end of middle school is a good time to introduce that. Same thing with physics concepts, because you're starting to bring in math calculations. And when you bring in math calculations, you kind of want them to have already seen something similar in their math programs. And so it matches up quite nicely with what they are most likely doing, whether they're in pre-algebra or algebra, and then applying that within the textbook. So given that chemistry was one of my majors, I'm always real picky on the chemistry stuff. So I was looking through a lot of how it is that they explained chemistry concepts, and I felt like it was decent. I'm not going to say that it was like my hands down favorite curriculum ever, but I feel like it's okay. It does the trick. And again, very visually engaging. There's lots of diagrams. There's explanations of formulas and equations. And so if you have a student who really needs their textbook to pop and draw their eye in, then they will like this. Now, comparing that to what we've actually used. As I mentioned, we used the BJU Science 6 for my son in 6th grade. And I wasn't particularly thrilled with it. I didn't like that it just didn't feel like he was getting much on any particular topic. And I felt like the videos were really long, dated, expensive, so it was not really my preference. But my daughter had done, when she was in 7th grade, she did the general science course from Apologia, and then physical science from Apologia in 8th grade. And then I had my son do the same 2 courses. General science from Apologia is, it's definitely like one of those, hey, we're going to teach you about lots of different science topics, but it does take it up like a huge jump, like compared to what you see, like the little bite-sized chunks you see in Science 5, Science 6 here. It's a lot. There's a lot of information covered in the Apologia General Science course. And we really liked it because it was challenging and it had lots of good information. And so we chose to stick with that when it came to physical science. And so physical science covered a lot of the similar topics to this physical science textbook, just in a different way. The other comparison kind of between the two, the thing that really stood out to me is that while all of these textbooks are very visually engaging, they have, again, lots of colorful pictures, lots of colorful diagrams, full page images. It definitely, they did not skimp on including graphics and images. Sometimes it can feel like it's a bit much. And maybe just because I've been reading textbooks that are styled a little differently for such a long time, but when I compare it to like how an Apologia textbook is set up, the Apologia textbooks will have, discussion questions, right? And they will be in a particular color box, and they will always be in that color box. If they are working out a problem, it is in another color box, and it's always in that color box. If it's a lab, it's always in a particular color. And that makes it very easy for you to find those within the lessons. And it also makes it a lot less busy on the eye, so that way you can focus in on what you're reading. Now, they do include, again, graphics and pictures and things like that in Apologia, but they have just kind of this way of having similar ways of displaying the information all throughout the textbook, and then through all of their textbooks, because they followed a similar pattern in physical science and in the biology course that we did. And then my daughter had done Apologia's chemistry course, but then my son did Barry and Builder's chemistry course. You can go back and watch old videos about why we did two different chemistry courses, but the way that the information was presented followed that similar pattern, and we really liked that. I also really liked that the courses for Apologia, the general science, the physical science, and then their high school courses, a lot of them came with an optional student notebook that had questions within there for the student to take notes. So it's kind of like a guided notes book, so they could see what kind of information they needed to be pulling from the text and writing it down and having it available. Whereas with this, we have the activity books and we have the lab books that went along with them. So you would probably want to work with your student on how to properly take notes from their reading, or how to highlight things if you're allowing them to highlight in their textbook, highlight their important things. But I think learning how to take good notes would definitely be something you'd want to work on with your student, to make sure that they are pulling out that information and kind of summarizing the things that they need to know if you're going to do the assessments that come along with it, the optional tests that you can get for this program. So all in all, it's not bad. I think the Science 5 update is lovely. I think it's a beautifully done book. I think it is great if you want to do those little science minutes. You want to introduce them to a lot of different science topics, but you don't necessarily want to do like long unit studies. I think Science 6 needs an overhaul still, so maybe that's on the gamut, because it looks like it's one of the few that hasn't had an overhaul in a while. But I would definitely suggest that you consider doing life science, earth science, and physical science as 6th, 7th, and 8th grade curriculum. And I think, again, life science might be the one that is most engaging for your 6th graders, and then kind of work your way up from there. That is, again, just my opinion looking at the curriculum and thinking ahead, of course, to how you'd want to lay out your science courses in high school. And you could totally take a different approach depending on what sciences your student needs or is interested in, or if they don't need any science courses at all, or they hate science. But if you have a student who's maybe college bound and particularly going into a field that is science related, there are certain things you're going to want to make sure that they are, learning prior to that. If you would like a closer look at any of these, if you'd like me to do maybe more of a deep dive review, highlighting certain things about any one of these, please drop a comment and let me know which one you are interested in finding out more about, because I have all of them on hand along with the teacher books and the lab books. And so it's been kind of fun to go back and flip through and look at these, especially since I've taught these subjects in the past, just with different curriculum, and so it's fun to be able to kind of go back and do some comparisons and look at it from the point of view of somebody who's already gone through teaching it. I'm not new to any of these subjects or any of the material. It's just the way that they're choosing to present it. But if you'd like to have a closer look at one of these, or a more in-depth review, let me know which ones you're most interested in, and I will be happy to do that. Thanks so much for joining me for today's video, everybody. I will see you in the next one. And until then, happy homeschooling.